All right, welcome to the Shout of the Script podcast. This is just after championship week, so we just had the college football playoff committee lined up with the 12 teams picked, and pretty controversial episode if you ask me. So if you're a first-time listener, thanks for joining in. If you are a repeat visitor, welcome back. And if you make sure to hit that subscribe button before you get started. If you haven't already, we're aiming for 100 subscribers before the end of the year. So super excited for that. We're very, very close. We had some good recognition on this past episode. I love the bit. I want to give a shout out to the Ani brothers for contributing to the podcast. I know Chad has not appeared yet. He will at a later date. But Turner did a phenomenal job, and hats off. I got a lot of compliments from him off to the side saying, man, he killed it. He did this, he did that. And I thought his takes on Lane Kiffin, we had a great time doing it. Afterwards, I pressed stop on the record button, and we just kind of stared at each other through the computer screens and was like, we just had that look. It was like that side look where it was like, all right, like that was good. That felt like we were on the mic together for 3 or 4 years. So very privileged to have him on. I'm really excited for where this podcast can go with all the contributors doing their part. And it's funny kind of bringing different folks together. Like, I have my cousin, and then I have my brother, then I have my 2 best friends from Dallas. I started this podcast with my best friend, and there's a potential chance that he returns to cover fantasy football at a later date. But that's, obviously not set in stone. And then, I've got a little brother out there. I've got an oldest brother out there, and so this could really, truly turn into a network that is just a great way to escape from the mainstream media. But of course, it takes more than just posting an episode. I got to do a better job of getting it out there and making things unique. But we're going to work on that, as we get closer to the end of the year. And, I've got some really fun things to kind of just throw out there to consider for season 4 and in the off season as my phone is chiming. It's been bugging all day. And it kind of pertains to today's episode in such a way to where, I did a conference realignment. I posted this on TikTok just briefly, but I haven't revealed it yet or anything, but I made a conference realignment. But the reason I have not shown anybody is I want the contributors to act as a committee and pitch in and make changes and make scheduling. And we're going to design a season. I literally was texting them when I put this group chat together. So I got homework. I got homework for you guys. I just made I just made a conference realignment with a 16 team playoff, or a 12, works either way. 10 teams in each division. We're going to name them certain things. We're going to have it geographically aligned. It's all going to coordinate. There's going to be plenty of funding for NIL. There's going to be plenty of reputable scheduling. There's going to be plenty of conference games. Everybody's going to play one another. Independents are no longer, a thing necessarily outside of Army and Navy. Like, Army and Navy were the only independents that I had on there. It looked beautiful. And just to kind of give you guys a sneak peek, and like I said, it's not completely done yet, but I just want to hear this, especially if you're listening. Just hear this. This is I'm bringing back the Southwestern Conference, but just listen to these and then imagine the matchups. The Texas Longhorns, the Texas A&M Aggies, Oklahoma Sooners, Oklahoma State Cowboys, TCU Horned Frogs, Texas Tech Red Raiders, SMU Mustangs, Houston Cougars, Missouri Tigers, Arkansas Razorbacks, Baylor Bears. And the Baylor, they're an outlier. I had them in there. I also had Missouri in a different conference, and then I've moved around South Carolina in the SEC a couple times. So Missouri and Arkansas are highlighted in there to say, like, what are we going to do with them? Because there are other geographical regions with conferences that have 9 teams that, we could take Baylor and put them in the Southwestern. But those matchups sounds great. And I did a hypothetical schedule with Texas A&M, for example, just because that's my alma mater. So I was like, all right, we'll just do a Texas A&M schedule and just see how it would look. So I imagined to myself one non-conference big time game a year, and then 9 conference games, and then 2. So that would be 10 total games plus, 2 throwaway games or whatever. Appalachia State kicked the living shit out of them from Paul Crew in The Longest Yard. So this would look like this for Texas A&M if it was in 2025 or just whatever. I just did a hypothetical schedule. At Notre Dame, week 1. At home versus Sam Houston State, week 2. Bye week. At Arkansas versus Oklahoma State versus SMU versus Missouri. At Oklahoma. At TCU. At home versus Texas Tech. Bye week. Houston, UTSA, at Texas at the end of the year. Did like a projected record. I was like thinking that if there was this year's team, I think they go 10-2, 7-2 in the conference, and then the rest of it is bracketing out the college football playoffs. So I probably just overshared a little bit on that, but dude, I was so excited looking at that. I geek out on this sort of stuff, and I think we're gonna do a phenomenal job in the offseason presenting this kind of as a group and saying, here's our solution to fixing college football. And I guess before we get into the college football playoffs and the selections there and the conference championship games, I guess I want to say my piece on college football, because I talked about this with Turner in the previous episode about how there's going to be drastic examples that prophesize basically an upcoming change to college football to make things better or worse. And I'm not going to say it's going to change for the better, because it's changed 2 or 3 times over the last 10 years. And frankly, it's only gotten worse. Now, the product of college football, meaning the execution on the field, the type of players, the talent pool, all that sort of stuff, the brands, the fans, that part of college football will never wither away. That'll always be electric, entertaining, and chaotic. But the national brand or product of college football has a major gap in it. And everyone knows this. You've heard it from Kirk Herbstreit. You've heard it from David Pollack. You've heard it from Joel Klatt. You've heard it from Josh Pate. You've heard it from, I want to be commissioner. I think this is the way to do it. Get rid of these committee guys. Barstool says this. ESPN says this. Notre Dame got robbed. Miami shouldn't be in. I mean, you can just go all day about how nobody's playing one another in conferences. 12 teams isn't enough. 12 teams is plenty enough. Why put Notre Dame in? Why not put Notre Dame in? Does head-to-head matter? Well, they played each other earlier in that year. It's a non-conference game. Well, the margin of victory for these guys was much greater. How does Texas A&M not get into the SEC championship after losing versus Texas? They have a better strength of schedule, record, et cetera, than Oregon, Ole Miss. How does Ole Miss get to coach or get to play in the college football playoffs without their head coach? Do they lose all their coordinators and stuff? Why are head coaches being hired right before the college football playoffs? Why is the transfer portal and signing day activating during Christmas? What is wrong with the calendar? The calendar needs to be, I just listed like 12 different issues within the realm of college football. And then you put up the selection committee or the commissioners and things like that. It's a bunch of boomers sitting in a conference room. And, and I kind of relate this to just off the dome. I haven't rehearsed this at all. This is all basically fresh off the dome. But I kind of relate this to, in the NFL, there was I called it a quarterback epidemic. But at the same time, I thought the coaching was great. I thought the coaching was smart. I thought it was innovative. I thought that the offenses that Sean McVay and LaFleur and the Shanahan tree guys were developing was super cool, super high tech, innovative, analytical. The game in that sense was getting a little bit better until, unless you're running just a pure RPO offense. But like if you watch the 49ers and the Rams and the Green Bay offense, there's just a lot of cool gadgets. And what do all those coaches have in common? They all got hired as young coaches. These guys, like a new generation of people. They weren't hiring 70-year-old coaches that have, the game of football has advanced. There is more to consider. There is more risk to take. There is less pussification of football, meaning, we're going for it on 4th down at midfield. The new NFL, analytics say go for it. You got to follow the analytics, got to go for it. And so when I think about it in terms of college football, I think, we've had great results with these young head coaches to where they're going out and they're winning Super Bowls. They're running innovative offenses. You know, you see an awakening in the political landscape of this world where there's a lot of young people who know what they believe and why they believe it. They understand the football game. There's just like this uproar of this young generation wanting to come in and begging for change in all aspects of life. And then college football is still sitting there, and it shows these boomers sitting in a room, you know, with whiskey glasses and cigars and things like that. And I know everybody's going to agree with this next take. How many of you guys have been in your office where you're working, or a cubicle, or if you're a sales guy, you're moving different arounds, and you start talking ball with that 50, 60, 70-year-old guy in the offense, and you have to just keep your mouth shut because of how abysmal, utterly abysmal the sports take is. But he's such a nice guy. You know for a fact that he doesn't watch football. He doesn't really necessarily know football. It's a different game now. It's boomer football bias boomer bias or whatever is what it is. And they're such sweet people or whatever. There's nothing wrong with the people. I'm just saying, you just know, like, you're grounded in your takes. You know exactly what you believe in and why you believe it. You understand that this quarterback is better than that one because of X, Y, and Z, or 1, 2, and 3. You just have your reasons. You've seen it. You've kept up with it. And then this guy comes along and says, I tell you what, the Dallas Cowboys should go hire Nick Saban. I mean, he would fix it in an instance. I'd do that, and you go and get a quarterback like Mark Sanchez off the bench. I legit had somebody say this, saying that Mark Sanchez would be a better quarterback over Dak Prescott, and Dak Prescott needs to be more like Brett Favre, who didn't throw a lot of interceptions. Who run at the time was covering NFL and stuff. I was, if you're watching, I'm just biting my tongue. Just, oh my God, what God is testing me today. And so that's how I imagine these boomers who are watching college football with their old fashions and their cigars and things like that, bro. They're more concerned on what their tea time is than who should actually get in the college football playoffs, or how to fix college football playoffs. Because I genuinely believe that there is no way in hell you can make a drastic change to pay college football players and then have it look like the wild, wild west. And in such a serious manner, that how college football presents itself. It's such a serious sport. There's a lot of protocols. There's a lot of tampering that you can't allow to happen. There's a lot of timelines you have to meet. The calendar is very strict. The transfer portal is strict. You know, coaches moving different. All of it's strict. And your solution to fixing college football was, we're going to have it the wild, wild west. There's not going to be any salary cap. There's not going to be, the NIL is going to be like this broken, no loyalty, no contract, no limit, who can spend the most, who can buy the most players. And before, in the golden age of college football, in terms of the national brand, the global brand, everybody saw a logo and said, that person has so much emotional support and bias for that brand that, you know, when you go into that stadium, it's going to be loud, it's going to be this, and the players are going to play for that logo, for the love of the game, because they didn't get paid. They played for the love of the game. Now they're getting paid $2.1 million to play for a year, and then if they don't get enough leverage or playing time, well, they're just going to go to the next highest bidder. And you've heard that in other places before. So just in my spiel, I just want to say, the solution to solving that is sitting. You've heard dozens. I'm not the only one. I'm not a special commentator on this to say like, oh, my idea is the best over here. This is right off the dome, but it's, in my eyes, pretty damn simple to just kind of look at the landscape and go, oh, okay, so we got these donors that are influencing 18-year-old athletes to go to certain schools because they're the highest bidder. So geographical location doesn't matter. Got it. So the way to fix that would be salary cap, contracts, and budgets, adjustable budgets. We'll get with accounting, we'll get with national accounts, we'll figure this thing out, right? And then additionally, we look at scheduling, and it's like, okay, we got a week 0 that has some teams playing, but then some other teams not playing. We've got 2 bye weeks. We've got some playing 7 conference games, some playing 9 conference games, some playing 10, some playing none, but they have agreement with a certain conference and all of the teams that they scheduled were handpicked. How do we determine at the end of the year, if I was logistically thinking ahead of time, how do I, and this is the committee talking again, how do I, looking at the landscape, how do I figure out who's the best? I'm looking at this schedule here, the Big Ten, that's all side by side. Oregon doesn't play Ohio State. Indiana doesn't play Ohio State. USC doesn't play Indiana or Ohio State either. All these Big Ten teams are in there. We got a big branded conference, but I think it's a little bigger than 10 teams. And so they're just kind of looking at that going, okay, not everybody plays one another, but simultaneously we're going to announce a champion. Okay, looking at that, the issue there right in front of their eyes that everybody can see that's listening to this is going, make it 10 teams, make everybody play one another. You know, what's the difference of what the brands make the conference? The conference doesn't make the brand. So, you know, dude, if you had a Big Ten conference and it was Texas A&M, or sorry, not Texas A&M, if you had a Big Ten conference and it was Texas, Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame, and a couple other big brands, you wouldn't give a shit what the conference was called. You would go, man, this conference is stacked. There are so many big branded teams in here. This is the best conference right there. They've got Bama, Ohio State. All these guys that are always in the playoffs are all in one conference, and they all play each other. It's nuts. The best team in the conference was 8-4. Yeah, like that would be crazy, right? And so that's what I'm asking for. I think that's what a lot of the college football audience is asking for. Is for crying out loud, make these guys play one another, damn it. Like, what's the point of college football if no one's going to play one another? How are we going to determine a champion? Well, you know, I think Oregon should be number 5 because they're 11-1 in their point differential, and I guess they got tested versus USC, and they had the rivalry game, quote unquote, versus Washington. But Texas A&M played an SEC schedule and beat LSU with their coach. But most of the SEC guys, well, they didn't play Alabama and they didn't play Georgia. Make them play one another. It's all just sitting there. And then, of course, you know, I'll just continue to ramble on. But, you know, you go to the calendar, you're looking at it right there, and you're like, okay, Lane Kiffin is considering leaving to LSU right before the college football playoffs. Oh, their AD is requesting that Lane Kiffin makes a decision right before the Egg Bowl. When's the Egg Bowl? Oh, shit, fire. The Egg Bowl is right before Thanksgiving, or right after Thanksgiving. Well, what's after that? The conference championship week, which means playoffs is the week after, 2 weeks after that. Wait, so you're telling me that if Lane Kiffin were to choose LSU, then Ole Miss would go into the playoffs without a coach? And it's happening to Lane too? Wait, and these other coaches are being hired on, which means they're gone. The bowl-eligible teams are losing their head coaches, which means we're going to get a lesser quality of football, whether at the highest stage or the medium stage or the lowest stage. Wait, what? Oh, okay, so we'll just adjust the calendar. We'll move it a week ahead of week 0 and call that week 1. We'll end the season around Thanksgiving in terms of the regular season or the conference championships are going to be played Thanksgiving weekend, something like that. We'll have an Army-Navy game at week 0 to kick off the season. Every year, you're kicking off the season with the most patriotic game of the year. Donald Trump or whoever the fuck is president, Palantir is going to show up and are going to sponsor the event, and everything's going to be great, fine, and dandy. Army-Navy kick off the college football season and the rest of football. This is the greatest show on turf, and we're going to play it on a USS destroyer with Blackhawks and Blackbirds, and Tom Cruise can fly his damn 20-knot spaceship over it and go, yep, he's going to parachute onto midfield. Tom Cruise, everybody. That's Maverick, who just landed at midfield, and now Army will do their salute with the band coming. Like, dude, that's easy. It's easy. Marketing people, come on. Marketing. Army, Navy, week 0, early August, in the season with conference championships in November. Don't start the transfer portal until after the calendar year or after the semester is over. Extend the semester and give the athletes some grace throughout the winter break so you can get the processing started early. It's not like they're going to go to fucking class anyway, and get this shit resolved. It's obvious. The problems are just staring you directly in the face. And I don't even know if I hit on all points there, but that was about a 20-minute rant. So this would be a good time for, one, I'm going to pop in a piece of nicotine because, boy, it's been a day. I honestly thought that this episode was going to be drowsy. I was thinking about taking pre-workout. I don't have a pre-workout I recommend. No, I'm not sponsored by any. So no, don't ask for recommendations. But it's been a day, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to muster up the energy. But thanks to my nicotine. Yeah. So, and like if I got family members watching, you're like, oh my God, my nephew or whoever does nicotine, I've got news for you. I'm 25 years old. I can do what I want. We used to joke about that when me and my best friend started the podcast. It was like, oh, we don't want to cuss, or we don't want to do this, or we don't. And I'm not trying to say, I try and keep things professional here. I probably have, on average, 2 to 3 cuss words an episode. Okay. I got a little bit of a potty mouth, not hiding that. But at the same time, at the time I was attached to a high school in terms of stipends, in terms of doing commentary work over there. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to go to this school and do this commentary, I probably shouldn't be saying, crap online, or, my co-host shouldn't be dropping F-bombs. And if I'd shout it out at these games, then we probably shouldn't shout it out at the games because, I'm cussing, he's cussing, we're saying different jokes. It's like, probably not a good idea. So, but my intentions the whole time were like, let's make this a professional show. We don't want a bunch of bearded fake fans who drink beer all day sitting there talking like Brandon Walker, these Barstool guys sitting here talking. They're fat as hell, just sitting with their feet kicked up. Well, I think all teams suck. And you're just like, whatever. That's not what I wanted this show to be. I'm rambling on. I apologize. But anyway, Merry Christmas. We're looking for 100 subscribers on the year. If you bored with me for the first 20 minutes there, we're looking for 100 subscribers. We're at around 92 right now, I believe. Unless somebody just unsubscribed. So we're at 91. We need 9 more for good measure. 101 would be great before December 31st. I don't ask for anything other than that. It just gives you notifications that our segment clips, which is about 3 to 5 minutes and 3 to 5 videos per week, are released. And then, of course, the main episode and things like that. So, and then you can follow us on Apple Music and Spotify, searching Shadow the Script. We do release the episodes on X. I'm not the most consistent at releasing them on X because I don't think they truly do anything. But if you prefer to listen on X, then it's there. Especially all the links and stuff. And, of course, I'm always commenting on the retardation that I see on the app all the time. So, but yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Let's get into the college football playoff selection. There's a lot to talk about there. And then we'll finish out with just some recap on the college football, the conference championship games. But I thought it was interesting that in the playoff selection committee, with everything that has been decided in terms of seeding, in terms of brackets, in terms of conference championship games, who gets penalized, who doesn't get penalized. And look, I'm going to cross-reference back over to where I was going, when I was rambling earlier, occasionally throughout this process, because it's relevant. And so what you got here is you got the first 4 seeds are Indiana, number 1, number 2 is Ohio State, Texas Tech, number 4, and Georgia, number 3. And so you're like, okay, conference championship winners, Big Ten runner-up. Both of them had phenomenal seasons. It was such a close game in the Big Ten championship. You can't knock either team for technically losing. I held the opinion of, well, that's not necessarily true, is it, for the Big Ten? Because Indiana and Ohio State didn't play one another. And I trolled on X and I said, should Ohio State make the playoffs? And I think I got like 20 votes on it. And people were like, what? That was like right after they lost. I was trolling. But that's my sense of humor. And so I was looking at that saying, okay, Indiana and Ohio State didn't play all year. So the first time they're ever going to match up is in the conference championship. Well, in the Big 12 championship, Texas Tech and BYU had already played one another. So they're playing each other for the second time that year, which makes it all the more definitive whether if BYU were to have won that football game, we would have been sitting here talking about BYU should be in. I don't know what happened in that first game. Might have been home field advantage, but on a neutral site, these teams are equal. And then on the flip side of that, with the SEC, Georgia and Alabama, it was like flip-flopped, right? Alabama beats Georgia. They had already played one another earlier that year somehow. Big 12 does a really good job of everybody practically playing one another. I would say they do the best job at it. But the SEC, Alabama, and Georgia happened to play one another. And Alabama won that game 24-21, right before the mid-season mark. And at the time, Alabama was on a roll with I think it was 4 or 5 ranked SEC wins in a row. So it was like, oh shit, we lost to Florida State. They're an ACC team. We lost by 2 possessions to them, and it was bang, 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 like 4 or 5 wins ranked SEC schools, beating Georgia, things like that. And so we were like, oh wow, Alabama looks impressive. And then, they kind of peaked at the beginning of the year because their hand was dealt, but they played each other for the second time in the conference championship game. And so Georgia kicks the brakes off of them, beats the absolute brakes off of them. And so, Alabama looked like shit. That's on a neutral site. So now the series is tied 1-1. So you think to yourself, well, how in the world do we evaluate Alabama and Georgia if Alabama has an out-of-conference loss versus a team that I don't believe finished as bowl eligible, but they had some strong ranked wins. Then they look like crud towards the end of the year against Auburn, who I know that's the Iron Bowl, and it's renowned as this very tough rivalry. Because when Saban was there, it was, okay, Saban, it was, oh, we're going to have these close games, or Auburn's going to win the football game, those types of matchups, and that was years ago. I think Auburn in the last 10 matchups, I do know this actually, in the last 11 now, 3-8. So, yeah, sure, it's a rivalry, but those 3 wins that they had, I believe one of them was Cam Newton way back when. I think the other one was the kick 6. And then the other one was and we've had some close ones with Bryce Young. We had a close one with Jalen Milroe. Excuse me. So, in terms of the Big 10, SEC, and Big 12 conference championship games, I looked at it okay, the Big 10 conference championship was the only group of teams that hadn't played one another yet. So I thought to myself, if Georgia were to win versus Bama like they did, I thought Georgia should have jumped the Big 10 team to show, hey, we're going to honor the fact that these guys matched up against one another and they played one another. And we got to honor the fact that the Big 10 teams did not play one another, so we got to treat this as an actual matchup on a neutral site, like the Red River Shootout. And to say, okay, well, we're gonna put Texas closer over Vanderbilt because of the head-to-head. We're gonna put them right behind Oklahoma because Oklahoma has a better record, but Texas beat them. We're gonna have them paired very close together in the AP poll. So that's really the only part that's a hot take for me. I understand I'm debunking the mainstream media here. That's my shadow the script take. I think Georgia should have jumped Ohio State. They have a better resume. They won their conference championship. They played Bama twice, who was in the conference championship. They look a whole lot better now than they did towards the beginning of the season where they were getting in these high-scoring shootouts. You got to see the Georgia Bulldogs defense kind of come to life in a game that matters in what seemingly was a playoff game. And you saw Ohio State versus Michigan have that slow start, and then versus Indiana missing field goals, only scoring 10 points. No, Indiana only scored 13. They missed a field goal as well. So I kind of thought logistically is, okay, we need to have Georgia jump Ohio State, have Ohio State 3, which is not a big penalty. They're still going to get a first-round bye, but that would have had Ohio State matched up with Ole Miss or Tulane, which will be Ole Miss. And then, they play the winner of Georgia and whoever wins between A&M and Miami. So, anywho, transitioning from the conference championship analysis of my shadow the script take there, and going back to saying like these teams should be playing one another without a shadow of a doubt. They should be playing one another. Transitioning from that, the rest of the ranks. So, like I mentioned before, ranks 1 through 4, Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech in order. 1 through 4 are the first round buys, and then your first round of playoffs in the top 12. You have I'll start from the bottom and go to seed number 5. You got JMU number 12, Tulane number 11, Miami number 10. They make it over Notre Dame. Oklahoma number 8, Alabama number 9. Texas A&M number 7, Ole Miss 6, and Oregon 5. And so I guess we got to answer the big question here. And you'll kind of, I guess you might see on the, I guess I'm going to title it this. I guess I'm going to title the episode The Whining Irish Part 2. We got to answer this question about Notre Dame. Look, I've been really hard on Notre Dame all year. I understand that. I have criticized their schedule. I've criticized them handpicking their matchups. I know they have an agreement with ACC. I know they have a financial contract with NBC to make them exclusive, independent, and one of the highest paid brands on television for viewership rights in the country, and they are the highest paid. So they have benefits to be independent. But the AD and the coach are coming out. There was an interview with Joel Klatt and Marcus Freeman, the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, basically saying, look, if we continue to get penalized as independent, then when the contract is up, we have to have a readjustment to say, well, should we join a conference, and does that benefit us to join a conference? And I think the answer to that question is answered itself with the committee choosing to neglect Notre Dame in the selection process and remove them from the playoffs because of a head-to-head matchup that happened in week 1 versus Miami. And let's not pretend that there isn't evidence to support Miami's claim to the college football playoff. Let's not pretend that there isn't, because their margins of victory versus similar opponents were far greater, or 3 of the 4 of them were greater. Notre Dame was evidently trying to run up the score against Stanford and other teams just to because I think they're smart enough to know that, all right, well, the rest of our teams that we're matched up with other than Pittsburgh and USC are all sub 500 programs in the ACC. So we need to find ways to convince the committee that our margin of victory is so evidently strong that, yeah, we lost those 2 ranked games at the beginning of the year to Miami and Miami and Texas A&M by a combined 4 points. But since then, we have been blowing every Power 5 school out of the water. And granted, these Power 5 schools are, Stanford and Navy, like 2 G5 schools were in there. Boston College, they had a poor performance versus Boston College. Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Narduzzi, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers, was basically like, we don't really give a shit if we win this game or not. So that was another storytelling take saying or foreshadowing take saying, hey, these guys need to join a conference because what importance does this game have to me if I can just go be a Duke, for instance, and get in the conference championship at 7-5? So I think Marcus Freeman answered his own question. I think the question of should Notre Dame join a conference, I think is yes. I look at how much the SEC and the Big Ten teams, the big branded teams, are paid for viewership rights, and what these what do you call them? Television companies, these corporations like NBC, CBS, ESPN. They're paying these SEC Big Ten schools, between $55 and $60 something million a year. And then you got Notre Dame getting 60 to 70 million to be independent and exclusive. So, but what benefit is that giving Notre Dame other than, okay, there's people watching them? Because there were a couple of games that were just on like Peacock and no one's really watching Notre Dame and Navy. They just see the final score. And, the committee's looking at that going, okay, who were they battle tested with? Okay, USC and Pittsburgh were their 2 best wins. How do we want to evaluate Pittsburgh? Because Miami kicked the crap out of Pittsburgh as well, and they won that head-to-head. So, with all things being said, Miami outright won the matchup between Notre Dame and Miami to be selected into the college football playoffs. And I remember tweeting this out saying, here's my college football 12-team playoff projections. This is right before the conference championships, if everything, or it was right after the conference championships, I believe. And I had Miami in there at the 10th ranked spot. And I said in parentheses that it was the right thing to do because the evidence supports that Miami won the head-to-head. 3 of the 4 similar opponents that they had, Miami won by a greater margin. Yes, they did not look as strong at the end of the year compared to Notre Dame, but at the same time, Miami played a pretty steady schedule all year long. They had won that Florida War, or the Florida Wars. So I don't know. I do know. I think that they made the right decision. And this is an example, what I talked about last episode. There has to be a drastic example to force change, whether it's for the good or the worse. And this is one of those drastic examples to say, okay, now we know. Shockingly, I actually did not expect the committee to make this decision, to be honest with you guys. I thought that Notre Dame was going to get in and Miami was going to get left out, because I've always joked on this podcast, those who bless Notre Dame will be blessed. I said this, and I saw a viral tweet go out, but I said this months ago. I said Notre Dame is the Israel of college football. And if you're aware of the political spectrum of today's world and how that name has been a major topic in the political landscape, the religious landscape, like I just kept saying, I noticed there's so much boomer bias. Well, it's just because it's Notre Dame. It's Notre Dame. You can't question it because it's Notre Dame. They're exclusive. They're independent. They've got this great brand. And then I also said, and this is all coming to light right now, like if you opened up X and you were searching for this stuff, like you would find it kind of going viral. I also said that if they expanded the college football playoff beyond 12 teams, Notre Dame would never miss a college football or a college football playoff appearance. They would never miss it because what happens is they play a relevant team or 2 or 3 and they go 1-2 or 2-1 versus them, and then they win the rest of their football games because the rest of their football games are not exactly tough challenges. They handpick the mediocre ACC opponents, and then they play a rivalry game versus USC every year, and then maybe there's 1 or 2 big-time games at the beginning of the year because that's the only time the schedule allows before conference play for them to play. So that being said, it's not even Miami's fault that they played week 1. It's Notre Dame's independence fault that they played that early in the year. Sorry, I was on the verge of a hiccup there. So that's why I've been saying the Whining Irish, and I thought that the committee would make the decision to put Notre Dame in because it's just Notre Dame, and they're just going to ignore all the credentials and logistics of it all and just say, well, the brand of Notre Dame should be in. That being said, another problem lies within the college football playoff format with 12 teams. This, I agree with this take that I saw, and I put my own spin on it, but there's a problem with inclusivity in the modern day of sports to say, well, we got to include everybody rather than competitiveness. This isn't fun, fair, positive college football. That's not what this is. So yeah, these G5 schools that are in, Tulane and James Madison, these are freebies. These are freebies for these playoff teams. Oregon, people are saying Oregon has the easiest path to the college football playoff. You got Oregon versus James Madison, and then they go play Texas Tech. And I don't think Texas Tech is like a slouch, but compared to Indiana, Ohio State, and Georgia, that's probably on paper the easiest team out of the 4, or the less challenging team out of the 4. And that's no disrespect to Texas Tech. They've bought their way into a phenomenal program this year. But like Oklahoma and Alabama, that's a really tough matchup. Then they got to go play the Big Ten winner in Indiana. Then they got to play the winner between Oregon and Texas Tech. That's the playoffs. You got to beat the best to be the best, right? Georgia, they play Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to beat Tulane. Ole Miss and Georgia. Whoever wins that game, let's just say it was Georgia. Georgia's got to play the winner of Ohio State and Miami or Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M has the toughest path to the college football playoff over everybody. They got to play Miami round 1, If they've won that, they got to play Ohio State round 2. And then if they win that, they got to play Georgia or Ole Miss round 3 in the semifinal. Then they got to win the national championship versus one of those big dogs on the other side. Like, I've already accepted the fact that Texas A&M is not winning this national championship. 2 wins would be great, and losing in the semifinal, I'd be like, okay, you had a phenomenal year. You guys were for real. But like, if we beat Miami and then got crushed by Ohio State, I'd be like, what the hell? But but these G5 schools that have found their way into the college football playoffs, and yes, a big portion of this is the ACC's fault because Duke won the ACC championship at 7-5. Somehow, kind of shows how shitty the conference is, and why another reason why people are looking at Miami in the college football playoff and saying, "Well, the ACC sucked," but then it's like, okay, well, at the same time, a 7-5 team should not be getting in the conference championship. Let's talk about that. There is no physical way. There should be head to head. There should be tiebreakers. They have way more losses. Like, I get it. In conference, they had a certain record. We should not be using that. Oh, I mean, the Giants could go. How many games do they play? So they play each team twice. There's 3 other teams, so 6. The Giants could go 5-1 in their conference and finish 6-11 on the year. Does that mean they make the playoffs? No. So I don't give a shit if Duke went 5-1 or whatever in their conference and they're 7-5 and they get in because, oh, well, they went 5-1 in their conference. That's another problem. If you're looking at it, it's obvious. You're like, no way. There's also no way a 10-2 team like Alabama should be getting in over an Ole Miss or a Texas A&M who only have 1 loss. I mean, it logistically does not make sense to my competitive mind. And so this inclusivity problem that we have in college football and in the modern day of sports in general has allowed us to place these G5 schools. And again, you've heard this around the world too. I have nothing against Tulane and JMU. I've got no ill will towards them, but let's be honest with ourselves. We all know this. They're going to get crushed. They're going to get absolutely slammed into the turf, and it's going to be, no one's going to want to watch those games. But if you were to remove that rule from college football and say, well, we're just going to do at large, 5 through 12 at large. We want the best teams playing the best teams in the playoffs. You would have had Notre Dame. You would have had BYU. And then Vanderbilt and Texas would have been the guys on the outside looking in, most likely. Or Vanderbilt might have got in, or Texas might have had enough room to get in because they had some leeway. But, that's another drastic example we can get into in the offseason about how Texas is probably not, or these teams are canceling these non-conference big-time matchups because there's no benefit. They'd rather just throw in another G5 school to kick the shit out of in weeks 1 through 3 than go on the road to Ohio State and prove they can play with the big dogs. So there's no point. That's another underlying problem with college football that is just blatantly obvious to fix. So, yeah, I mean, there's a portion of this college football playoff that is just not appealing to the fan. It's not appealing to the product, and it's an issue that has to get resolved next year. Like, they need to be working on that yesterday. So, in terms of that, I'm very, very discouraged in how it all turned out, and I even have problems with the seeding with Oregon and Ole Miss over Texas A&M. I thought Texas A&M played a far tougher schedule than Oregon. I thought Ole Miss had a far greater season than Oregon, but they lost their head coach. So why is Ole Miss over Texas A&M? Oh, wait, they didn't play one another, so we don't know. We can't tell. But we do know, the only ones we do know, it looks right on the screen because Oklahoma beat Alabama. We're going to have Oklahoma number 8 and Alabama number 9 because that makes sense. There was a head-to-head there. We got lucky with that one. So it's like, it makes no justifiable sense. So again, I told you, we're going to be cross-referencing the problems that I mentioned in the first 20 minutes with the current college football playoff selection process. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to cover with that. But, next week, I know Army-Navy is this upcoming weekend, and then the next weekend is the first round of the playoffs, but we'll get into predictions next week. But I had to put my focus on the problems. and the solutions we must provide to make the quality of football and college athletics better. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I mean, in terms of my team, if you're a Texas A&M Aggie, you know, you're a little discouraged on where we landed. Like, yes, I do believe that every team should be playing the best teams, and you have to beat the best to play the best. But you're looking at like, you're like, oh man, you really have to play your best football for 3 or 4 weeks, and that's everything you want in a team. It's like, it's blatantly obvious that A&M has the toughest path to the national championship. So my expectations are 100% set. In terms of recap, you know, I was going to go into, I was going to say, in terms of recap, and I'll get into a little bit about these bowl games. In terms of recap, you know, the Big Ten, right? The Big Ten Conference Championship, it was Indiana, Ohio State. Pretty clear. Both teams were undefeated. These guys are getting in. They didn't play one another. Would have been nice to see, like, okay, this team played. Everybody. I keep saying that, but it would have been nice to see that everybody played one another, and we got to explicitly see who the best team was, the best 2 teams were, and have them play in a conference championship for all the marbles. It wasn't that case in the Big Ten, but, you know, we saw how even these 2 teams were. We saw that coaching matters. You know, Kirk Cignetti has done a tremendous job over the last 2 years turning Indiana into what appears to be a powerhouse. You know, Fernando Mendoza made some big time throws in the third level in one-on-one scenarios. You know, slot fades, skinny posts. You know, he was making some good throws, and you know, it was like 15 of 23 for 200 and something yards, a touchdown and a pick. Julian Sayin, you know, he didn't play awful. He did what he had to do to put their team in the best position to win, you know, to tie the game at 13, and then your kicker botches the field goal, and you lose the game 13-10. But, you know, the game management, what we saw in that game was limited possessions. We saw Indiana trying to keep the ball away from Ohio State. We saw Ohio State trying to keep the ball away from Indiana. We saw both teams trying to establish some sort of a run game. We saw both defenses really get after one another. Just kind of the turmoil of put the ball down, let us go out there and play to win. It felt like such a big game. Like there was so much more implications in the Big Ten championship than they were maybe in the Big 12. The Big 12 championship, speaking of, between Texas Tech and BYU, this is where I think that the BYU fans have zero leverage with their how in the world can we be penalized for being in a conference championship game and then removing us out of the playoffs. You've clearly shown that you can't beat Texas Tech. You can't even get close with Texas Tech. You've shown that in a game versus Utah in the Holy War and in a late game versus Arizona that you played very close with them. And neither of those teams were in the college football playoffs. So, and you got this fat ass running out there for quarterback number 47. It just looks like crap. So I think the committee, in terms of thinking like a boomer, they're like, that looks like shit. I don't want to put that guy in the playoffs. Nobody wants to watch BYU in the playoffs. I know it's not about that, but Texas Tech, they didn't even play that well on offense again. They had all these turnovers. They didn't convert them into a lot of touchdowns. They converted them to field goals, and they still kicked the snot out of BYU. And BYU, if you watch this football game, the first drive, and there's people tweeting everywhere, oh, BYU came out to play today. BYU looks great. That offensive drive was phenomenal. What happened was, if you know football, what happened was they picked every trick out of their handbag, their small little Lululemon bag on the side of their hip. They picked out every trick play out of the book and used it all on the first drive to score a touchdown. And then what happened? They didn't touch the end zone or a field goal again in that game. It was all Texas Tech after that. So it's like, no, they didn't. They're not in their bag today. They took everything out of the bag on their first drive, and now the bag's empty, and they got no fuel. They're running on fumes. Not even that. They got no gas. They're stranded. So they got completely out-physicaled, outplayed, and they lost a turnover war by a large margin. Done. That's the second time you guys have gotten blown out by Texas Tech. BYU, done. Out. We don't want to see you in the playoffs, because looking at the playoff landscape, the political landscape of college football. Yeah. No, looking at the playoff landscape, seeing Texas Tech in there, it's like, okay, out of the 4 teams who got the bye, who's the weakest team on paper? Probably Texas Tech, between Georgia, Ohio State, Indiana. Probably Texas Tech. Would Texas A&M beat Texas Tech? On paper, probably says yes. Would Alabama? Would Oklahoma? Like, I think Texas Tech's a great team, but like, are they the strongest even with the first round bye? No, I don't think so. On paper, I don't think so. No, it's great to go prove it on the football field. They're going to play Oregon in 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, but like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to see BYU if they can't beat Texas Tech, who is probably, somewhere in the middle between all these playoff teams. Then what are we putting them in for? So they can just be there. We're happy to be here, like JMU and Tulane are. Like, where would you have them matched up? They would probably be the 10th seed, if anything. So you would play. It would be A&M at BYU. No thanks. So, and then you got. The SEC championship, that was an absolute ass kicking by Georgia. Georgia's defense, that's the best they've looked all year, in my opinion. They buckled up the first time against Alabama. In my opinion, I thought they looked, they're only allowing 24 points versus Alabama in that first matchup. I believe they had the lead in the first half, and Alabama came back. But like, man, they looked for real. Gunnar Stockton played well. The running game was established. Their defense was the highlight of the game, in my opinion. Ty Simpson was constantly under duress, taking big shots in the backfield. They were missing Jan Miller on offense at running back for Alabama. And you get in these games a lot of times with Kalen DeBoer's team, these physical matchups to where you need these big-time matchups in the SEC with Alabama. And yeah, I know they won those ranked football games earlier in the year within their conference, but like, there's been a couple of times where like, they just don't look ready for the moment. They look like they're getting out physical. They look like their game plan is so much more subpar than their opposing coach. But then they go out and beat Georgia earlier in the year. So I know people are saying that, so it's very contradictory. It's unpredictable. It's chaotic. But people were saying, okay, can Alabama be penalized and removed out of the playoffs? So the only 3-loss team technically in the playoffs. Should they be penalized for getting their ass kicked in the SEC championship? And I know this sucks. I know you guys don't want to hear this. I don't necessarily believe this either. You can't do it because they beat Georgia already. They beat them, and I believe it was on the road. I want to confirm that while I'm talking, but if they've already beaten the SEC championship team or the team that appeared in the championship and then they lost, it's just kind of a conundrum to say, well, what do we do with them? Because, yeah, they went into Georgia in week 5 and won. And yeah, they got their shit kicked in the conference championship game by Georgia, but it's like, what was that first game, a fluke by Georgia? No, like, Alabama played well. I remember watching that game. They played phenomenally. So you made it to a big brand, premium conference championship game, and you got your shit kicked in. So, and I would argue that Alabama shouldn't have been in the conference championship game. I think they should have been right on the outside looking in. I think Ole Miss and A&M should have had the record to show that they should be in over Alabama. I don't believe that you can lose a non-conference game to a team that didn't make a bowl game and somehow win the tiebreaker because of your conference record to get over a team that has a better overall record and beat their non-conference opponent, such as A&M versus Notre Dame, who was a top 12 or top 15 team. So that doesn't make sense to me. So that would have never happened if that was the case, but you might have would have seen A&M lose a second game, or however that would have worked. But yeah, so interesting stuff there. I think the committee, I think they were forced to take Alabama because of that win versus Georgia. If they lost to Georgia earlier in the year and won an extra game somewhere, let's say they beat Florida State and then lost to Georgia, and they wouldn't have been in the conference championship that way either. So this was the shit hand that was dealt. Another drastic example of, hey, everybody should be playing one another. You know, we could have had a tiebreaker between A&M and Alabama, or Ole Miss and Alabama, but we didn't. So we're stuck with a 28-7 ass kicking in the conference championship. So should they be in the playoffs? I think so. I think Alabama should be in. I understand you look at the record, you're like 10-3. Why the hell are they in? You know, you can't penalize too much on a conference championship game when they've already beat the team that's in the conference championship. You can penalize a team who made it to the conference championship in the Big 12 and got their shit kicked in twice by the same team, and those are your only two losses. You can. It's like, oh, rules for thee, but not for no. Like, there's a reason. You know, it's a case-by-case basis because of the current state of college football and how they have it outlined and how they have it portrayed in the landscape of it all. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. That's the truth. That's why BYU was penalized and Alabama was not. It's the only reason I can think of logistically. I think it's right. It's another drastic example to get it fixed where it's blatantly obvious and go, okay, how do we fix this the next time? Do we just make the playoffs bigger so people don't get mad at us? No, that's not the case. If you're going to make the playoffs bigger, then you got to find a way that everybody plays one another. There's a clear and concise winner of the conference championship. There's at-large teams. There's no G5 bids, because when the hell has a G5 team ever been in the top 15 other than like Boise State with Ashton Genty, who ran for 3,000 freaking yards? So what are we doing? Trying to get to 100 subscribers. So we're at 91, 92 right now. I've mentioned that a couple times in this episode. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. That way you get notified for our latest episodes, our YouTube shorts. You can like and repost those. And then, of course, the 3 to 5 minute or 10-minute segment clips, highlighting just different spotlighting categorical topics within each episode. That way you don't have to sit here for an hour. If you have something else you're going to do, you're like, I want to catch that key moment. Click on the key moment there, and you got yourself a nice little segment clip that is kind of sped up a little bit, so you're saving a bit of time, but you're catching a little bit of the relevant action with updated news and debunking the mainstream media and shattering the script. But we're trying to make it to 100 subscribers, so make sure to hit that subscribe button in YouTube, and then, of course, you can follow on Apple Podcast or Spotify by searching at Shatter the Script, and you can watch or listen on those platforms as well. And then weekly, I'm posting 60-second clips or so on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts. So, all right. Now, I think that's it. I think that's all I want to talk about. I have free will. I'm tired. No, I'm playing. I think next week, I know I'm talking slow towards the end of this episode, but I think next week we're going to be talking about the bowl team, like the bowl games and Notre Dame pulling out of the bowl game, and why they're doing it, and if it's stupid or if it's not, and why these other teams that are 5 wins, like there's bowl eligible teams that are also dropping out, like Iowa State, but then like 5 and 7 teams are getting the opportunity to play in these bowl games, and they're denying it too, and it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And whatever, like, put South Carolina in a bowl game. But we'll talk. I think we're going to talk about that next week, because I would like multiple opinions on what's happening in that area of college football, because I value the contributors' opinions on that. So we'll see how that goes. We'll cover that next week, and then we'll also do the predictions for the upcoming first round of the playoffs. And of course, we'll skip over Oregon and Ole Miss because they're playing the G5 schools, but we'll hit it hard and maybe recap the Army-Navy game, and then we'll keep hinting at the the conference realignment and the fun tools we'll get into in the off season to pique your guys' interest. So, but yeah, you can find all our stuff at Shadow the Script or at the link tree in the bio. If you're listening on YouTube or anywhere, you can find our link within the platforms that you are listening on to get all of the action, to find all the content and that sort of thing. So what we do here is we shadow the script. We debunk their mainstream media alongside contributors, Turner and Chad Awney, Jacob Clark, Ryan May, myself, Jared May, and always happy to bring you the truth in an authentic way. And I appreciate all the support in season 3 that we've had this year. We're concluding towards the end of the year when the national championship happens. So it'll be season 4 after that, and we'll have a cool little schedule coming up in 2026 with all the new contributors that we have. Super excited for that. But you guys take it easy. I will see y'all next week. We get closer to Christmas. Put the tree up. Get the decorations out. Be joyful. Count your blessings. Thank God. Do all those sorts of things. God bless. Later. Oh, wait. Hold on. I have something. I actually wanted to try this. I totally forgot I had this. Let's see if I've always wanted to try this. This is my boy. My boy made me this little stinger before you guys go out. And Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining the Shadow the Script podcast. And we will see y'all next week.